Today's video will demonstrate the observer design pattern. Hello, I'm James Helfrich. The observer design pattern enables one part of the program to communicate with many parts of the program, even if that part of the program is selected dynamically at runtime. This video will demonstrate the observer design pattern and define how it's used. The observer design pattern, also known as the publisher-subscriber, is a message passing strategy where multiple objects can subscribe to a class of events. This ensures that only interested objects will receive notifications. There are two main components to this pattern, the subjects and the observers. A subject is one that generates messages, and an observer is one that receives the messages. A subject can have 0 or more observers, and each of which is kept in a list. When the subject publishes a message, then every observer in the list is notified by calling its updated method. So for an example, let's say a colonel wants to communicate to a company, then it's going to send the message to the company commander. Now, the company is then going to send it to every single person in the company. And most of the people may not be interested in that message. So how can we use the observer design pattern to solve this problem? So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to create collections of interest groups, like those interested in the M16, those interested in fitness, those interested in the pension, and those interested in training. Using the observer design pattern, only those who subscribe to a given class of messages will receive the messages. So let's take a look at the class diagram. We're going to start with a subject, and the subject is the one who generates the message. Now there's me an audience, and that's me a collection of observer. So we need to have an abstract observer, and notice how there are many. Therefore, we're going to have aggregation. I'm going to have a subscribe and an unsubscribe. So a given observer can add himself to the list or remove themselves from a list. I'm also going to have a notify. And notify is going to call the update message for the abstract observer. Now notice this is a pure virtual function because the equals 0. And because there is at least one pure virtual function in its class, that makes this an abstract class, and hence the name abstract observer. Now, derived off this, I'm going to have a concrete observer 1 and a concrete observer 2. And each one is going to instantiate their update message, and they're going to do something with it. So for an example, if the subject wants to notify, it's going to say for each observer in the audience, I'm going to send that person a message. So how can we subscribe? We're going to say if the observer is not in audience, then I will push back on my list of observers. And I can unsubscribe by finding a given observer and then removing it from the list. Let's take a look at an example here. Back to our company commander. So we're going to have some notifications, and we're going to call it an inbox. And we're going to have our subscribe, unsubscribe, and notify. So the inbox is going to take the update message. And so there is going to be many potential inboxes in my notification list. So we're going to have two inboxes, one for Lieutenant Lewis and one for Captain Campbell. Now notice I could have many different inboxes, but I'll just do two now. I'm going to do something different here. Notice that notifications : notify is a pure virtual function, which means I have to have a derived class. So I'm going to have one derived class on M16s, and then I have another one on pensions. Now, for every different types of message, I can have different derived classes here. For an example, let's say we have Captain Campbell. He's going to want to subscribe to M16, pension, and fitness. And of course, Lieutenant Lewis will probably have a different subscriber list. So what's going to happen when a message arrives? Well, I'm going to see if the word M16 or the word AR-15 is somewhere in the message. And if it is, then I'm going to send everyone who's interested in M16s that particular email message. Similarly, if the message contains pension or 401k, then once again, I'm going to send everyone who's interested in pensions this message. And then finally, if there's any message that containing the word pool or gym or PRT for physical readiness test or track or anything like that, then I'm going to send all the fitness people that message. Here's another example. A video game consists of many movable objects in the arena. All the objects move on their own accord, but one, the avatar, can be controlled by the user. In certain circumstances, the user can control many objects at once. So I'm going to have the user, and that's going to be the audience, and the audience can have many potential objects. So I need to have an object, and how many are there going to be? There's going to be many. And notice how I can add an object with subscribe and remove an object with unsubscribe. And then, of course, I have my notify. I'm going to have a couple derived classes. In fact, I'm going to have three. One for the avatar, who's always going to be honoring the message, and then object 1 and object 2, who may, on certain circumstances, respond to the event. And all these are going to be related to object through inheritance. This is example 44.3 in the observer section of the message passing chapter of the software design textbook.